Welcome, Mr. Denome, and welcome to this war update. There has been a major escalation in the war between Ukraine and Russia, and it is that USA is withdrawing its support for Ukraine, at least for the most parts. And this is a total shock over Ukraine. I see the Western leaders are panicking over this, but this is now the reality. So I want to talk about what's going on in Ukraine right now. I will also talk about the situation between Iran and Israel and Palestine, give a brief update what's going on there, because I do expect that war to escalate at some point in the future again. So I will give a total update on the situation, but before we go there, briefly, as you can see, Bitcoin is breaking throughout this previous structure. So before I started making this video, I thought, I really should do a crypto update today, but since I already prepared for a war update, I will do that anyway. And tomorrow I will talk about the price of Bitcoin. But most likely, since this seems to be a breakout from previous structure, if $108,000 holds, then most likely we will go to like $113,000 like I showed in the previous update. So if you are trading this, you can still place your long orders here as long as you have your stop losses at about $108,000. That's where I think that price will hold. Now, if we go below that, then it is a fake out and we will probably go lower from there. But right now, it seems to be that we are having a breakout to the upside. Now, let's actually get back to the situation in Ukraine. So the big news that we got is United States is halting some missile shipments, and it's not only missile shipments, it's much more than that. So when we scroll down the news here, you can see that they are talking about a shipment of 30 Patriot air defense missiles, 8,500 artillery shells, 250 precision mobile rocket artillery missiles, and 142 Hellfire air-to-surface missiles. These are missiles that will be attached to F-16 fighter jets. And this is now the shipment that has been halted, but it also means that the future shipments most likely will be halted as well. And this situation, this is what I've been talking about since the start of this war, is that Russia most likely will win, whether you like it. Doesn't matter how much you support Ukraine, most likely Russia will win simply for the fact that it has a better manufacturing capabilities. Even now, Russia is outproducing the whole Western countries by a factor of 3 or 4 times more military equipment, weapons, drones, all these things than the West combined. And that is an insane number, but that is the reality of the situation. I understand many people will probably dislike this video, as have done in the past, but that unfortunately is the situation. And as you can see, Ukrainians are in total shock of this suspension. And the reason why this suspension happens is the United States is saying that this is the first America First agenda, but in reality, the US military stockpiles are just running too low. They have pretty much emptied all of their capabilities on these wars. They had a war against Yemen, they had a war in Iran, and they've been sustaining this war against Russia. And now the equipment is basically done all through Europe, all through USA as well. So that is the situation there. And obviously, this is good news for Russia, but this also means that throughout 2025, when Trump has been pushing for a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, they knew that they are running low on supplies, and that's why they tried to push for a ceasefire, but obviously that did not work out. So now the only thing they can do is basically just suspend the shipments, because there's nothing left, there's nothing more to give to Ukraine, unfortunately. So that is the situation there. Now, when we take a look at the map here, you can see all these red markings here are pretty much Russian explosions from Russia against Ukraine, and blue ones are explosions or situations from Ukraine to Russia. And you can see from this interactive map how dominant Russia is against Ukraine, and it's just more dominant as time passes, because the Russian army keeps expanding. They recruit more and more and more people, whereas Ukraine has difficulties recruiting more and more people, especially now that the war seems to be not going in their favor, then the morale is not as good for people to join the military anymore. And especially when the shipments are now delayed, you can start to imagine the panic that will take over the Ukrainian front lines. Now, it doesn't mean that the war will end in a month or two or even a year, but this simply means that most likely now we will see an acceleration of advances from Russia to Ukraine. So that is the situation there. And also, when we take a look at the territory, I know the rhetoric from, especially from the Western news, has been that Russia is unable to advance over Ukraine. But if we just take a look at the last 12 months, you can see that Ukrainian gains, the only gains they have been able to make was in August 2024, when they went over to the Russian area, basically undefended land, and then they put all of their uh, power to basically seize some land territory from Russia, and they tried to hold it for as long as they could. But as you can see, over time, the gray area, Russia was able to gain that back and also make advances in other areas over Ukraine more and more and more. So Russia is completely overpowering Ukraine. The only thing Ukraine can do is slow down Russia's advancement. And as you can see, this ends in March 2025. Now, going into what has happened here, this is directly from the US Department of Defense from July 2nd. The update that they gave is that since they made this capability review, they now understand that the assistance that they provided to Ukraine, they will now have to uh, review USA's capabilities and divert the efforts in basically other areas. And they try to frame it as nicely as they can, citing the MAGA movement, America First. But the reality is, USA simply cannot sustain multiple fronts at this scale. What US Army is best for is something called shock and awe. So USA has the best special forces on the planet, no question about it. What they are proficient in, USA, is exert as much force as possible very quickly to try to overthrow a government, install a new regime via CIA's helping, obviously, and supporting the opposition in a target country. And then once they exert all of that military pressure, bombing campaigns, assassinations, then they will install a new regime, and that will basically take over the army of that country. Now, this is the strategy here. You can see they came up with it in 1996. Basically, they already started to develop it after the Vietnam War, when the military industrial complex in the United States realized that these war of attritions, which Russia is now doing in Ukraine, those are very uh, the population of USA doesn't like that kind of warfare, and they turn against the government like they did in Vietnam. So they had to develop some other form of war where not as many people are involved in the war effort as in Vietnam. So that's why they tried to expand the special forces, and as well as the air superiority, sea superiority, all of these things. So this is what USA is basically trained for. But when you fight a war like Russia is fighting against Ukraine, the USA simply cannot win, because it is not designed to win a war of attritions. That is basically what's going on here. And now, this is interesting. This is coming from Kiev Independent. Russia cannot launch 500 drones every day, Ukraine's intel chief says. And this is interesting because previously, when we take a look at the news here, actually, before we do that, I saw this chart from this article, and this was basically showing the capabilities that Russia currently possesses. So these are Russian drone launches against Ukraine basically since a year ago. And you can see the capabilities that Russia has continue to grow and grow and grow. As the war machine of Russia becomes better, it becomes more involved. The production of drones, missiles, it simply keeps growing, whereas the capabilities of Ukraine cannot keep up with that pressure. And you can see here now in the month of June, according to Ukraine, 5,300 drones were launched against Ukraine. This means roughly 150 drones per day, but these numbers most likely are downplayed. And here in this article, the Ukrainian, what was it? Ukraine's intel chief, he says that 500 Shahed drones every day is just not realistic. So that's what he's saying here. What they expect is that maybe some days they can send 500 drones, but not every single day. And right now, Russia has been sustaining very, very high numbers of bombings, as we saw in the interactive map here, uh, this one, and they simply continue day after day after day. And when we look back on the articles, this is from May 26th of 2025, you can see that a Russian Federation attacks of 1,000 drones per day may become a reality. So Russia is expanding its drone capabilities, and these drone strikes become more and more common as the time passes. Personally, I do not doubt this number that they can get to 500 per day or 1,000 per day. I think it's simply a matter of accepting reality that this will start to happen as the war progresses. And because this is the reality, now USA is basically backing down from this fight, because the only thing they can do is basically throw good money after bad money. And unfortunately, for Ukraine, that means basically defeat, and there's no escaping from it. And now, what Ukraine has to come to grips with is negotiations with Russia and basically bending over to Russia's terms. If they don't do that, it will mean that they will lose more ground here. But also, this means for USA that it has lost a lot of its faith in the military, obviously. And that's probably why we're seeing in the United States budget massive increases in military spending. And that's why Trump is talking about bringing back the manufacturing base into United States, because they cannot win these wars anymore that previously they were able to win. Now, going into Iran and Israel situation, we know there was the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, but a lot of the damages that Israel received have not been posted online, because they issued an order where civilians and journalists in Israel basically were not allowed to make any footage online about the strikes against military facilities. If you did that, then you could face jail or something worse. But according to some intelligence, USA spent 15 to 20% of its anti-missile arsenal in just 11 days of mid-intensity combat, and that cost United States already $800 million, plus all of the damages, which are publicly estimated at $3 billion in Israel. If this war had continued, Israel would have been basically bare naked against all of these attacks, and there would have been nothing that Israel could do against Iran. From Iran's side, my analysis is that Iran only wants to protect itself. It does not want to destroy Israel. And for that reason, whenever Israel and USA came up with the ceasefire plan, Iran simply said, okay, fine, just stop shooting at us and we will stop shooting at you. And then they made the theatrics on the facilities of those nuclear facilities. Now, the USA still insists that all of the nuclear capabilities of Iran have been destroyed, but more and more reports are coming out that Iran still has basically all of its capabilities fully open, and they can basically get back to the same position they were before this 12-day war in a matter of months or weeks. Basically, nothing has changed in that front. And from my perspective, if anything has changed, it has fast forwarded the adoption of a nuclear bomb for Iran. Because now Iran president has signed a law which has suspended the cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Association and IAEA. This has been basically the body, the international body that governs over nuclear energy, nuclear proliferation, as well as obviously the nuclear programs. And what Iran is suspecting, what Russia is suspecting, is that IAEA secretly gave out information from Iran to Israel and to United States, which allowed Israel to basically murder and assassinate the Iran's nuclear scientists across Iran when the attack started. And obviously, they knew some of the weaknesses in those bases and all of these different things. That's why Iran cannot take IAEA seriously anymore, and they have basically expelled and banned the chief, the head of IAEA from going into Iran ever again. So that has been the situation there. But USA obviously condemns Iran's suspension of cooperation with the IAEA. And if this suspension continues, which I believe it will continue, then it's up to Trump if he will strike against Iran at some point in the future. Right now, there's obviously the ceasefire, but USA is not in the, it doesn't have the capability to strike Iran at this time. So in the future, what I believe USA will do is it will redesign its military so that it can attack Iran in the future. Right now, USA basically is trying to distance itself from these different war zones, and it is building up the arsenal. And unfortunately, Ukraine has become a collateral in their efforts, which I've been basically saying throughout the start of the war, that Ukraine is simply a piece for United States to try to weaken Russia, and it's not they are not fighting to the end for Ukraine, and eventually Ukraine will just be a devastated country. So the best way for Ukraine to protect its land, its people, is to negotiate a peace deal with Russia. But obviously, nobody listened to me, so that's where we are right now. Now, personally, I don't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb, because if it does build a nuclear bomb, then other countries in that region will also want to have a nuclear bomb. And then the chances that somebody accidentally pisses some other country off too much, and then somebody fires a nuke, and then another country fires a nuke, and then it's the end of the world. So I don't want Iran to have a nuke, but I will say that USA and Israel fucked this up. That's my opinion of the situation, because now Iran is basically forced to build a nuke. Now, there's a couple of other alternatives for building a nuke. One alternative that Iran has is to make an agreement between Iran and Russia, and between China and Iran, a defensive alliance, so to say, kind of like what NATO is, but with other powers. If they do something like that, which Russia and China have wanted in the past, that will give up some of Iran's sovereignty, just like many countries who have not joined NATO have given up some of their sovereignty. That goes against the ideology that Iran's religious leaders have over Iran. But that would allow Iran to not build a nuclear bomb, but it would also give deterrence for Israel and USA to attack Iran again. So overall, the situation is still extremely volatile, and I don't believe this is the end. I still believe that Iran, because of its strategic location, it still is under threat from Israel and United States in the future. Now, what was interesting about this whole attack was the coordination between Mossad, which is the intelligence agency of Israel, and CIA. So the head of Mossad, David Barnea, basically came out on a video saying thank you to CIA for this coordinated effort against Iran, as well as it went ahead and thanked the head of CIA as well. It's not said here in the news article from the Times of Israel, but if you watch the video where he was talking, he basically gave thanks to CIA and the head of CIA for all of the help that they got. It's basically the same thing in Ukraine as well. CIA has its hands all over Ukraine as well. They found the CIA bases, which were disclosed by the New York Times. But all in all, that is the situation there. Now, another interesting situation here obviously comes in Syria, where they were successfully able to initiate the shock and awe strategy that I explained before, and they installed a literal terrorist as the head of Syria because I think I forgot Jolani was the name of this guy. He was a former, I think, ISIS terrorist. They even had a $5 million bounty on his head, but then he basically joined hands with CIA, and now a terrorist is basically the head of Syria, and they are basically on the side of CIA. So when USA says that Iran is the head of all of these terrorist acts all over the globe, I will just ask, okay, why do you then appoint a terrorist as the head of Syria when you could have other uh, candidates for your regime change? But anyway, that's the situation. That is the world we live in. And then finally, before I let you guys go, Trump is now pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza as well. So a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza, and Trump is basically saying that Israel has already agreed to the conditions. But whenever Trump talks, most often he is lying. So when he says that Israel has agreed to something, uh, do not take it as a fact until Israel says that they have agreed to conditions and now it is going forward. And many times in the past, whenever Israel even comes to agreement on a ceasefire, eventually Israel just breaks the ceasefire anyway, like we saw in January when Trump made a 30-day ceasefire. Then Israel basically blew up that ceasefire anyway and continued its destruction of Gaza. And even today, when we go over to Google, you can see 230-kilogram bomb, US-made bomb, was targeting a Gaza cafe, and experts call it a war crime. Obviously, a journalist died there, and some aid workers, and many other people. And even now, Israel is launching airstrikes in southern Lebanon as well. So Israel is continuing on its path. So, in my opinion, it's just a matter of time before Iran goes up in flame again. But the big thing now is to see what's going on in Ukraine. From my perspective, what we can expect is more land grabs from Russia to continue, and we will probably start to see some record breaking land grabs as time passes. And eventually, this will lead to a capitulation of the government of Ukraine, and then a new government will be coming into power. And then that government will make a peace deal with Russia, and then some amount of Ukraine will remain, and that will basically be the end of the war. That's my expectations. I don't see a way for Ukraine to come out of this in any good form. The only thing Ukraine can really militarily do now is sabotage and terrorist activities, try to do asymmetric warfare, which is sometimes called terrorism, and try to do some nasty tricks against Russia. But if they do that, then Russia could declare the what they currently call this a special military operation to upgrade it into a counter-terrorist operation. And if they do that, then they can start hunting even Zelensky and some other key leaders of the government. I don't think Russia wants to go there. I think they would rather capitulate the government without touching the head figures of the government. But if Ukraine forces Russia's hands, then things could get really messy from that point onwards. So let's see how things continue. That is the war update. Extremely difficult situation, but as you can see, Bitcoin is liking these updates as of now. Eventually, what this means is money printing, debasement of money, and more of that I will talk about in tomorrow's crypto update. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you got some info out of this. Let me know in the comments if you completely disagree with my assessment, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks and bye bye.